Late into the night at Blake Dynamics headquarters, CEO Serafina Blake raised an eyebrow with playful arrogance as she noticed George Dermott, the janitor, mopping the floor near the complex data board that had stumped her entire engineering team. She laughed, half teasing, half dismissive. "Solve this, and I'll give you a kiss," she said. No one expected him to pause, glance at the equations for only a few seconds, and then solve it completely. Serafina stood frozen, her heartbeat skipping rhythm. She had no idea she had just awakened a buried genius. The glass tower of Blake Dynamics rose like a pillar of modern ambition against the city skyline. Inside, everything gleamed with the cold perfection of steel and LED lighting. This was a place where artificial intelligence and robotics shaped the future, where innovation walked on marble floors and spoke in algorithms. The corporation belonged to the elite, to those who moved markets with keystrokes and changed industries with presentations. At the helm stood Serafina Blake, 34 years old, sharp as winter frost and twice as beautiful. Her platinum blonde hair fell in precise waves over tailored shoulders. Her wardrobe spoke in the language of power. Every seam calculated, every accessory chosen with intent. She trusted few people, and believed even fewer deserved trust. In her world, excellence was the baseline, and mediocrity was unforgivable. She had built her career on the conviction that she could see the entire map of life spread before her, every variable accounted for, every risk measured and contained. But there were corners of that map she never examined closely, places she assumed held nothing of interest. The maintenance staff, for instance. The people who emptied trash bins and cleaned conference rooms after midnight. People like George Dermott. George worked the night shift. He arrived when executives left, when the building exhaled its daytime tension and settled into quieter rhythms. He was 36 years old, tall with a solid frame that suggested strength without aggression. His uniform was worn but clean, his hands always gloved, his shoes inexpensive but polished. He moved through the corridors with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being unseen. Most employees passed him without a glance, and that suited him fine. He preferred the solitude of night work, the hum of floor buffers and the soft glow of emergency lighting his only companions. What no one at Blake Dynamics knew, what not a single person in that gleaming tower suspected, was that George Dermott had once been a National Mathematics Prize winner. He had received a full scholarship offer from Harvard. His professors had called him extraordinary, a once-in-a-generation mind. But life had other plans. His younger brother had been in a terrible accident. Medical bills piled up like snow in a storm. His father lost his job. His mother collapsed under the weight of it all. George had made a choice that thousands make in silence every day. He set aside his scholarship, his future, his dreams. He took whatever work he could find to keep his family afloat. Over the years, the brilliant student faded into the background, became invisible, became just another person doing what needed to be done. Serafina had noticed him occasionally. Brief encounters in hallways. A polite nod when she stayed late. She did not dislike him, but she categorized him quickly and completely. He was outside her system, irrelevant to her goals. Yet, somewhere beneath her conscious awareness, a small voice whispered that something about him did not fit the usual pattern. His eyes were too focused, his movements too deliberate. But she dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. She had more important things to consider. The company was in crisis. A core energy algorithm had developed a critical flaw. The engineering team had been working around the clock, brilliant minds throwing themselves against an invisible wall. Nothing worked. Every solution led to another dead end. In 48 hours, Serafina was scheduled to present the breakthrough to a global audience. Investors, partners, competitors, all watching. Failure was not an option she could entertain. The night stretched long and thin. Most of the engineers had gone home, defeated and exhausted. Only Serafina remained, staring at the whiteboard covered in equations that refused to cooperate. The office lights had dimmed to energy-saving mode. Yellow light reflected off the polished floors. Somewhere in the distance, the soft sound of cleaning equipment hummed its monotonous song. She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache that would last for days. That was when George entered the room. He pushed his cleaning cart with practiced quietness, not wanting to disturb her concentration. But as he worked near the edge of the conference area, his eyes drifted to the whiteboard. Just for a moment. Just a glance. Something flickered in his expression, a recognition so quick most people would have missed it entirely. Serafina caught it. Her instincts for reading people were finely tuned, honed by years of negotiation and corporate warfare. She turned toward him, irritation mixing with curiosity. "Do you understand something about this?" Her voice carried an edge of sarcasm, the automatic response of someone used to being the smartest person in every room. George hesitated. He could have stayed silent, should have stayed silent. But exhaustion loosens the tongue, and he had spent so many years keeping his knowledge locked away. "I think," he said carefully, "you might have the intermediate variable set incorrectly." Serafina felt the world tilt slightly. She stared at him. This man in a custodian's uniform. This person she had never truly seen. Then she laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone confronting something so absurd it could only be a joke. "All right," she said, her voice dripping with amused condescension. "If you are really as clever as that sounds, then solve this and I will give you a kiss." She meant it as a dismissal disguised as a challenge. A way to end an uncomfortable moment and return to her work. She expected him to back down, to mumble an apology, and return to his mop bucket. She expected the natural order to reassert itself. But George did not back down. He stood still for a long moment, looking at her, then at the board. The air in the room changed, became heavier, charged with possibility. He stepped forward. He picked up a marker, and he began to write. His hand moved with quiet confidence. Each step of the solution flowed naturally into the next. The equations reformed themselves under his touch, complex tangles straightening into elegant lines. Serafina watched, her amusement fading into something colder and sharper. Shock, perhaps, or the first tremor of understanding that she had been catastrophically wrong about something fundamental. When George finished, he set the marker down on the table with a soft click. "You can check it now," he said simply. Serafina moved closer to the board. Her eyes scanned the work. Once. Twice. Her face went pale, then flushed. Every instinct told her to find a flaw, to prove him wrong, to restore the hierarchy she understood. But the solution was flawless. It was more than correct. It was brilliant. The kind of work that comes from deep understanding, not lucky guessing. She felt something shift inside her chest, a tectonic movement of assumptions cracking apart. For the first time in years, Serafina Blake felt truly surprised. And beneath that surprise, something else stirred. Curiosity, respect, and the uncomfortable sting of shame. She turned to face him fully. "Sit down," she said. Her voice different now. Softer. More genuine. "Please, I need to understand who you are." George wanted to refuse. He wanted to maintain the boundary between their worlds. But the way she looked at him in that moment was not the look of a CEO addressing an employee. It was the look of one human being recognizing another. Saturday. The story came slowly at first, then faster. He told her about the scholarship, about the awards, and the professors who had believed in him. He told her about the phone call that changed everything, the hospital, the bills, the impossible choices. He told her about working 3 jobs to keep his brother in physical therapy, about his father's quiet despair, about watching his mother age 10 years in 2. He told her about packing away his textbooks, telling himself it was temporary, knowing it was not. "Why did you not go back?" Serafina asked. "You have the talent." "Clearly. You could have returned to school eventually." George smiled, and it was a sad smile, the kind that carries the weight of years. "Not everyone has the privilege of chasing dreams," he said quietly. "Some of us have to make sure other people survive first." Serafina fell silent. The words hung in the air between them. For years, she had operated on the assumption that success came to those who were smart enough and determined enough to seize it. She had never truly considered what happened to brilliant people born without safety nets, without backup plans, without the luxury of failure. Her entire worldview, so carefully constructed, revealed itself as incomplete. She felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: humility, and underneath that, something else entirely. A stirring of admiration. A flutter of interest that had nothing to do with algorithms or business. She looked at this man who had sacrificed everything for his family, who possessed extraordinary gifts he had buried to serve others, and she felt her heart shift in ways she could not yet name. For the first time in a very long time, Serafina Blake wondered if she had been looking at the world all wrong. The days that followed changed the rhythm of Serafina's work. She began leaving small challenges on the whiteboard in the conference room she knew George cleaned: mathematical puzzles, logic problems, optimization questions. Each morning, she would find them solved, the work neat and confident. She started staying later, timing her work to coincide with his shift. Their conversations grew longer, ranging beyond mathematics into books and music and philosophy. She learned he still kept his old textbooks in a storage unit, though he had not opened them in years. He learned she had once believed intelligence could not emerge from poverty, a belief she now saw as both ignorant and cruel. One night, she gave him a particularly complex combinatorics problem, the kind universities used for graduate qualifying exams. He solved it in minutes. She stood with her arms crossed, watching him work, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. "You make it look easy," she said. "It is easy," he replied, "when you understand the underlying structure." Their eyes met. The moment stretched. "Intelligence does not ask where you were born," George said softly. The words struck something deep inside Serafina. She felt her carefully maintained composure crack just slightly. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As weeks passed, Serafina noticed changes in herself that both confused and alarmed her. She found herself thinking about George during the day. She caught herself checking the time, anticipating the evening when he would arrive. She adjusted her appearance before going downstairs, applying lipstick she did not normally wear, fixing her hair in ways that felt ridiculous. She was a CEO, for heaven's sake. Why did she care what a janitor thought of her appearance? But she did care. That was the problem. Her assistant Amanda noticed. "You are spending a lot of time on the cleaning schedule," Amanda observed one afternoon, her tone carefully neutral. "I am ensuring coverage," Serafina replied too quickly. "Right, coverage. Has nothing to do with a certain night shift employee." Serafina felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is absurd." Amanda smiled knowingly. "If you say so." The truth was, Serafina did not know how to categorize what she felt. It was not the straightforward attraction she had experienced before, the kind that could be acted upon and resolved. This was more complicated. It tangled with respect, admiration, guilt, and a growing sense that she had spent her entire adult life operating with a deeply flawed understanding of human value. George had shown her that brilliance could live anywhere, that dignity belonged to everyone regardless of their job title. He had done so without lectures or judgment, simply by being himself. George felt the shift too. He noticed the way Serafina looked at him now, the care she took with their conversations. It terrified him. He was a janitor. She was a CEO. The distance between them was not just social. It was cosmic. He had no right to imagine anything more than professional courtesy, yet he could not stop his heart from hoping, could not stop himself from looking forward to seeing her each night. He told himself it was dangerous. He told himself to maintain boundaries. His heart refused to listen. Then the crisis came. It arrived on a Tuesday morning with the force of a digital hurricane. Blake Dynamics' core algorithm had been hacked. Someone had infiltrated their systems and corrupted the code at its foundation. The global presentation was less than 24 hours away. The engineering team worked frantically, but every attempt to restore the system created new problems. By evening, the senior engineers were openly saying it could not be fixed in time. The company's reputation, its future contracts, its market valuation, all of it hung in the balance. Serafina stood in the war room, surrounded by monitors displaying cascading errors. She felt panic rising, a cold pressure in her chest she had not experienced since her early days building the company. Her team looked at her with exhaustion and defeat in their eyes. She needed a miracle. She needed someone who could see the invisible architecture of the problem. She needed someone who understood systems from their foundations. Without conscious thought, she found herself saying his name, George. I need George. Her senior vice president looked at her in confusion. George? Who? George Dermott. From maintenance. Get him up here now. The room fell into stunned silence, but no one dared argue with the tone in her voice. George arrived 20 minutes later, still in his work uniform, confused and worried. Serafina met him at the door. I need your help, she said simply. I know I have no right to ask, but I am asking anyway. He looked past her, at the room full of senior engineers, at the screens showing code collapsing in real time. He looked back at her face and saw genuine desperation there. And trust. She was trusting him with everything. Show me, he said. For 15 minutes, George studied the system. He asked questions that made the engineers glance at each other in surprise. He traced pathways through the code with his finger, muttering half to himself. Then he turned to Serafina. I can fix this, but it requires rebuilding 3 core modules from the ground up. It will take all night, and I will need full access. The senior vice president started to object. We cannot possibly give security clearance to do it. Serafina cut him off. Her voice was ice and steel. Give him whatever he needs. The room erupted in quiet chaos. Board members called. Legal counsel advised caution. But Serafina did not waver. She stood behind George as he worked, her presence a shield against doubt and criticism. She watched as his fingers flew across keyboards, as he rebuilt corrupted systems with a speed and precision that left the professional engineers shaking their heads in disbelief. The night stretched toward dawn, 3:58 in the morning. George typed the final command. The system compiled. Errors cleared. The algorithm stabilized. The monitors shifted from red to green. The room fell silent as death. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone. George stood, exhausted, and turned to face Serafina. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude. Yes, but something more. Something that made his heart race. You saved us, she said quietly. Only he could hear her. You saved everything. You trusted me, he replied. That was the harder part. They left the war room together as dawn began to paint the eastern sky. Serafina led him to the rooftop terrace, a place normally reserved for executive gatherings. They stood together watching the city wake up. The air smelled clean and new. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Serafina broke the silence. That night, when I said, "Solve this, and I will give you a kiss," I did not think you could do it. I was mocking you. George smiled slightly. I know. I need to apologize for that. For all the ways I did not see you. For believing my position made me better. You do not owe me anything. Yes, Serafina said firmly, turning to look at him directly. I do. I owe you an apology, and I owe you an opportunity. A real one. The morning light caught in her hair. George felt his breath catch. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them, but he held himself still, certain that any move forward would shatter something fragile and precious. Within days, rumors spread through Blake Dynamics like wildfire. The CEO and the janitor. The story was too strange, too dramatic not to become gossip. Some employees found it romantic. Others found it scandalous. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. They expressed concerns about company image, about propriety, about maintaining professional boundaries. Several senior members suggested that George should be let go, quietly, to avoid further disruption. When George learned of the pressure Serafina faced, he made a decision. He submitted his resignation. Not because he wanted to leave, because he could not bear watching her damaged by association with him. He left the envelope on her desk and walked out before she arrived. Serafina found it at 9:37 in the morning. She read it once, felt rage ignite in her chest, and immediately called security to find him. They located him in the parking garage, heading toward his car. "You are leaving because of me?" She did not yell. Her voice was too controlled for that. But it shook with intensity. George turned. "I am leaving because you are being hurt. By people who think I do not belong. You are giving them exactly what they want. I am giving you back your reputation. I do not want my reputation if it costs me your respect." They stood in the concrete dimness of the garage, voices echoing off pillars. George searched her face. "Serafina, no," she interrupted. "You do not get to make this choice for me. You do not get to decide what I can handle. I am strong enough to stand for what I believe is right. This will hurt you. Not having you here will hurt more." The words hung between them. George felt something break open inside his chest, a flood of feeling he had been holding back for weeks. But before he could respond, Serafina turned and walked back toward the elevator. "Do not leave," she called over her shoulder. "Trust me, please." The next morning, Serafina called an all-staff meeting. The main auditorium filled with employees, executives, board members. Everyone sensed something significant was about to happen. Serafina walked to the podium with the calm of a woman who had already made her decision and would not be swayed. "I want to address some rumors that have been circulating," she began. Her voice filled the space, clear and unwavering. "It has come to my attention that some people in this company feel entitled to judge others based on their job titles rather than their abilities. Let me be absolutely clear. No one in this room has the right to determine another person's worth based on where they work or what uniform they wear." The room shifted uncomfortably. She continued. "Last week, when our entire core system failed, when every senior engineer told me we had no solution, one person saved this company. That person was George Dermott. Some of you know him as a member of our custodial staff. I know him as one of the most brilliant minds I have ever encountered. He solved problems in hours that our highest-paid consultants could not solve in months. He did so with grace, humility, and zero expectation of recognition." She paused, scanning the room. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "If anyone here believes their education or position makes them superior to George, I invite you to prove it. Stand up. Come forward. Show me you can match what he did. I will wait." Silence. Not a single person moved. Several executives looked at their shoes. "That is what I thought," Serafina said. From today forward, any employee who creates a hostile environment based on someone's role in this company will be terminated. Immediately. Without severance. Are we clear? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the auditorium. The board members sat stiffly, knowing they had been outmaneuvered. George stood outside the auditorium doors. He had heard every word. His eyes burned. His throat felt tight. He had spent so many years invisible, so many years believing he deserved invisibility. And now this woman, this brilliant, fierce woman, had stood before hundreds of people and declared his value. Not because she had to, because she chose to. 2 days later, Serafina found George in the parking garage at the end of his shift. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows. She carried an envelope in her hand. "I want to offer you a position," she said. "Algorithmic consultant for our new quantum computing division." George stared at her. "I am not qualified. I do not have the degrees." Serafina stepped closer. "George, you are more qualified than anyone I have ever met. You are brilliant. You are dedicated. You understand systems at a level most people cannot reach. And more than that, you are kind. You gave up your dreams so your family could survive. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She held out the envelope. He did not take it. "What about?" he said slowly. "What about that kiss you promised?" Serafina felt her cheeks flush. She had not expected him to bring that up. For a moment, she was not a CEO but simply a woman caught off guard. Then she smiled. "I think," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, "we should start with coffee. A proper conversation, not at 2 in the morning in an empty office." George nodded slowly. A smile spread across his face, genuine and warm. "I would like that. But first," Serafina said, holding up the envelope again, "you need to take this job, because I am selfish, and I want to work with you, because you make me think differently about everything, because I need someone who will challenge me, and teach me, and remind me not to be arrogant. And because I think we could build something extraordinary together, professionally, and maybe, eventually, other ways too." The vulnerability in her voice, the honesty, it shattered the last wall George had built around his heart. He took the envelope. "Okay," he said. "Yes, I will take the job." "Good," Serafina said, relief flooding her features. "Report Monday morning, 9th floor. And George? Wear whatever makes you comfortable. I do not care about dress codes. I care about brilliance." 6 weeks later, the transformation was complete. George worked in the research division now, his desk surrounded by monitors and whiteboards. The engineers who had once ignored him now sought his advice constantly. Projects moved faster with his input, problems that seemed impossible untangled under his examination. Word spread through the tech industry about Blake Dynamics' mysterious new consultant. The genius who had appeared from nowhere. Serafina found excuses to visit the research floor multiple times a day. She claimed she was checking progress. Amanda rolled her eyes and said nothing. Everyone knew the truth. They could see it in the way Serafina's entire demeanor changed when George was in the room. The way she laughed more easily, argued more passionately, listened more carefully. She was falling. Had already fallen. Was simply waiting for the right moment to say so. One evening, after most staff had left, Serafina found George in the quantum testing lab. Blue light from the equipment reflected off the walls, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. He was studying data streams, completely absorbed. She watched him work for a moment, admiring the intensity of his focus. "George," she said softly. He turned, smiled when he saw her. "Working late again. I could say the same to you." She moved closer, stood beside him at the console. "How is the project?" "Good. Better than good. We are ahead of schedule. That seems to happen when you are involved. George laughed quietly. I think you give me too much credit. I think, Serafina said, turning to face him fully, I do not give you enough. For a long time, I measured people by the wrong standards. Position, wealth, pedigree, and then I met someone who had nothing I thought mattered, and everything that actually does. Intelligence, integrity, courage, kindness. George's breath caught. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. Serafina, let me finish, she said gently. I need to tell you something. When you solved that equation, when you proved me wrong about everything I thought I knew, something shifted in me. I started seeing the world differently, seeing myself differently, and seeing you. Really seeing you. Not as a janitor or a consultant or any label, just as George. And I realized that what I feel is not gratitude or professional respect, though I feel those things too. What I feel is much more complicated and terrifying and wonderful. The blue light made her eyes look almost luminous. George felt his heart hammering. What do you feel? Serafina smiled. A little nervous. A little brave. If I told you I liked you, would it help you solve equations faster? He remembered the first night. Her teasing challenge, how far they had come. He stepped closer. Not touching her, but close enough that the space between them felt electric. You should test that theory, he said quietly. I intend to, Serafina replied. Starting now, with dinner, tomorrow night, away from the office, just us. Is that acceptable? George felt joy spread through him like sunlight. More than acceptable. They stood together in the quantum lab, surrounded by the gentle hum of machines and the glow of future technology. Neither moved to leave. The moment felt perfect, balanced on the edge of something new and precious. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, two people who had begun as strangers from different worlds found themselves standing at the beginning of something neither could have predicted. Serafina reached out. Let her hand rest gently on his arm. Thank you, she said. For what? For being patient with me. For teaching me what actually matters. For being you. George covered her hand with his own. Thank you for seeing me. For giving me a chance. For being brave enough to challenge everything you thought you knew. They smiled at each other. There would be time for everything else. Time for dinners and conversations. And the slow unfolding of connection. Time for the kiss she had promised as a joke, and now wanted to give for entirely different reasons. But for now, this was enough. Standing together in the quiet, two brilliant minds and two careful hearts, beginning to understand they might fit together after all. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. Projects to build. Problems to solve. A relationship to nurture slowly and carefully. And underneath it all, a truth they both now understood. That value lives in unexpected places. That intelligence has no uniform. That love, when it comes, does not ask permission or follow rules. It simply arrives, patient and persistent, waiting for two people brave enough to recognize it and welcome it home.